The Yuezhi or Rouzhi were an ancient Indo-European people who were first reported living in an arid grassland area spanning the modern Chinese provinces of Xinjiang and Gansu, before the 2nd century BCE. After a major defeat by the Xiongnu, the Yuèzhī fragmented, during the 2nd century BCE, into groups that emigrated in different directions. The Greater Yuezhi or Great Yuezhi migrated west through the Tarim Basin into the Ili Valley, where they reportedly displaced elements of the Sakas. Most members of another group, the Lesser Yuezhi or Little Yuezhi, reportedly moved south towards the Tibetan Plateau. The Greater Yuezhi were driven from the Ili Valley by the Wusun and migrated southward to Sogdia and, later, Bactria, where they displaced the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. The Greater Yuezhi were consequently often identified with the Tocharioi and Asii or Asioi mentioned in classical European sources. During the 1st century BCE, one of the 5 major Yuezhi tribes in Bactria, the Kushanas, began to subsume the other tribes and neighboring peoples. The subsequent Kushan Empire, at its peak in the 3rd century CE, stretched from Turfan in the Tarim Basin, in the north to Pataliputra on the Gangetic plain of India in the south. The Kushanas played an important role in the development of trade on the Silk Road and the introduction of Buddhism to China. Name. There are numerous theories about the origin of the Chinese name Yuezhi, written with the characters Yu, moon, and Shi, clan, but none has yet found general acceptance. Some scholars, such as Zhang Guangda, have suggested that the name Yuezhi may be a sinicized transliteration of an endonym, cognate to Visha of Esh in Eastern Iranian languages, or Vijaya. This theory has not been widely accepted. The relationship between the Yuezhi and other Indo-European peoples who lived in China and Central Asia is often unclear. The Kushanas, who were among the conquerors of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom during the 2nd century BC, are widely believed to have originated as a dynastic clan or tribe of the Yuezhi, because some inhabitants of Bactria became known as Tochara or Tokaroi, and these names became retrospectively associated with the Yuezhi, when manuscripts dating from the A.D. 6th to 8th centuries, and written in 2 hitherto unknown centum-type non-Iranian languages, were discovered in the northern Tarim Basin. The early 20th century linguist Friedrich W. K. Müller assumed that the authors were Tokaroi and referred to the newly discovered languages as Tocharian. This became the common name for both the languages of the Tarim manuscripts and the people who produced them. Most historians now reject the identification of the Tokaroi of Bactria with the Tocharians of the Tarim, because the Tokaroi are not known to have spoken any languages other than Bactrian, a Satem-type Eastern Iranian language. Other scholars suggest, however, that the Kushanas may be an example of an invading or colonizing elite adopting a local language. That is, they did not necessarily speak Bactrian before arriving in Bactria, and they may previously have spoken the Tocharian languages of the Tarim. In support of this claim, Christopher Beckworth argues that the character, usually read as Old Chinese *n jat and gt, modern U, could have been pronounced in an archaic northwestern dialect as *tokwa or *togwa, a form that resembles the Bactrian name Takayo micron alpha rho and the medieval form Takaya tilde Takaya. Likewise, Craig Benjamin points out that the problem of identifying the Yuezhi intersects history and language, since they may have spoken the Centum Indo-European language variant of Tocharian. Theories on origins. The Yuezhi may have been Indo-European people, as indicated by the portraits of the kings on the coins that were struck following their exodus to Transoxiana. Portraits from statues in Kalchian, Bactria in the 1st century BCE. Some old place names in Gansu explainable in Tocharian languages, and especially the coins which they struck in India as Kushans. According to one theory. The Yuezhi were connected to a large migration of Indo-European speaking peoples from Eastern Central Asia in the Bronze Age. These were possibly ethnic Tocharian speakers and connected to the Afana-Servo culture. The very well-preserved Tarim mummies from the 18th century BCE to the 1st centuries BCE with Europoid features and dominated by the Y DNA haplogroup R1A1 have been found in the Tarim Basin. One mummy today displayed at the Yuèzhī Museum and dated from the 3rd century BCE, found at the ancient oasis on the Silk Road, near, has been connected to the Yuèzhī. Evidence of the Indo-European Tocharian languages also has been found in the same geographical area, although the first known epigraphic evidence dates to the 6th century CE. The degree of differentiation between Tocharian A and Tocharian B and the absence of Tocharian language remains beyond that area suggests that a common Tocharian language existed in the same area of Yuèzhī settlement during the second half of the first millennium BCE. Esther Jacobson emphasizes that the Yuèzhī Kushans may properly be considered to have belonged to the larger Sino-Siberian culture. The nomadic people, probably Scythians, of the Ordos culture of the Ordos Plateau, who lived in northern China, east of the Yuèzhī, are another of a later similar migration. According to some scholars, the Yuèzhī might themselves have been Scythians. The Yuèzhī are associated by some scholars with the Ordos culture. Also, the Europoid mummies of Pazyryk, which were probably Scythian in origin, were found around 1,500 kilometers northwest of the Yuèzhī and date to around the 3rd century BCE. The Pazyryk burials coincide with the apex of Yuèzhī power, and have been connected to the Yuèzhī by some scholars. Early history. The Yuèzhī are described in ancient Chinese historical accounts. They may have been mentioned by Sima Qian, who described how the first Qin emperor, Qin Shi Huang, had dealt with a man named Luo, leader of a people called Wuxi, in the trade of both jade and horses. Sima Qian also makes the first clear reference to the Yuèzhī, saying that, in the 2nd century BCE, the Yuèzhī originally lived in the area between the Kilian Heavenly Mountains and Dunhuang. While the area between the Kilian and Dunhuang lies in the modern Chinese province of Gansu, some scholars have argued that Dunhuang should be Dunhong, a mountain in the Tiyun Shan, and have placed the original homeland of the Yuèzhī 1,000 kilometers further west. A text known as the Guanzi described how nomadic pastoralists called the Yushi and Yushi had supplied jade to the Chinese. The supply of Tarim Basin jade from ancient times is well documented archaeologically. The hundreds of jade pieces found in the tomb of Fu Hao from the late Shang dynasty all originated from Khotan, on the southern rim of the Tarim Basin. According to the Guanzi, the peoples of the Tarim, unlike the neighboring Xiongnu, did not engage in conflict with nearby Han Chinese states. During the Warring States period, the Chinese also turned to the Yuèzhī for the supply of good horses. Moreover, the Yuèzhī supplied the Qin Empire with crucial military mounts. The Yuèzhī maintained a profitable trade of horses and cattle for Chinese silk, which they sold on to the neighbors. Thus the Yuèzhī began the Silk Road trade, acting as intermediaries between China and Central Asia. However, the Yuèzhī were regularly in conflict with the Xiongnu. Around 210 BCE, the Xiongnu king Tumen gave his son Modu as hostage to the Yuèzhī and then attacked them, hoping they would kill Modu, leaving the succession open to Modu's younger brother. However, Modu escaped by stealing a fast horse. He subsequently killed his father and became ruler of the Xiongnu. Exodus of the Great Yuezhi, shortly before 176 BCE, led by one of Modu's tribal chiefs. The Xiongnu invaded Yuezhi territory in the Gansu region and achieved a crushing victory. Modu boasted in a letter to the Han Emperor that due to the excellence of his fighting men and the strength of his horses, he has succeeded in wiping out the Yuezhī, slaughtering or forcing to submission every number of the tribe. The son of Modu, Lao Shangchani, subsequently killed the king of the Yuezhī and, in accordance with nomadic traditions, made a drinking cup out of his skull. Quote, according to Chinese sources, elements of the Yuezhī settled in the Tarim Basin, under the domination of the Xiongnu. Some may have been, in part, the ancestors of the Tocharian cultures first attested in the 6th century CE. It was around this time that the Yuezhī split into two confederations, the so-called Greater Yuezhi and the Lesser Little Yuezhi. The Yuezhī began migrating northwest from the Tarim Basin circa 165 BCE, first settling in the Ili Valley, immediately north of the Tian Shan Mountains, where they defeated the Sai. The Yuezhī attacked the king of the Sai, who moved a considerable distance to the south, and the Yuezhī then occupied his lands. This was the first historically recorded movement of peoples originating in the high plateaus of Asia. The Sakas ultimately established an Indo-Scythian kingdom in northern India. In 132 BCE, the Wu soon, in alliance with the Xiongnu and out of revenge from an earlier conflict, again managed to dislodge the Yuezhī, forcing them to move southwest. The Yuezhī passed through the neighboring urban civilization of Dayuan and settled on the northern bank of the Oxus, in the region of Transoxiana, just north of the Hellenistic Greco-Bactrian kingdom. The Greek city of Alexandria on the Oxus was apparently burned to the ground by the Yuezhī around 145 BCE. Yuezhī settlement in Central Asia. Transoxiana. The Yuezhī were visited in Transoxiana by a Chinese mission, led by Zhang Qian in 126 BCE, which sought an offensive alliance with the Yuezhī against the Xiongnu. Zhang Qian, who spent a year in Transoxiana and Bactria, wrote a detailed account in the Shiji, which gives considerable insight into the situation in Central Asia at the time. The request for an alliance was denied by the son of the slain Yuezhī king, who preferred to maintain peace in Transoxiana rather than seek revenge. Zhang Qian also reported that the Great Yuezhi lived 2,000 or 3,000 li west of Dayuan, north of the Gui River. They are bordered on the south by Daxia, on the west by Anxi, and on the north by Kangju. They are a nation of nomads, moving from place to place with the herds, and the customs are like those of the Xiongnu. They have some 100,000 or 200,000 archer warriors. Quote, in a sweeping analysis of the physical types and cultures of Central Asia, Zhang Qian reports that, although the states from Dayuan west to Anxi speak rather different languages, their customs are generally similar and the languages mutually intelligible. The men have deep-set eyes and profuse beards and whiskers. They are skillful at commerce and will haggle over a fraction of a cent. Women are held in great respect, and the men make decisions on the advice of the women. Quote, in 124 BCE, the Yuezhi were apparently involved in a war against the Parthians, in which the Parthian king Artabanus II was wounded and died. During the war against the Tochari, he was wounded in the arm and died immediately. Pompeius Trogus also mentions that Artabanus II was mortally wounded by the Tochari. Bactria sometime after 124 BCE, possibly following further incursions from the north, and apparently also following a defeat by the Parthian king Mithridates II, successor to Artabanus. The Yuezhi moved south to Bactria. This event is recorded in classical Greek sources, when Strabo, who tended to refer to all Central Asian tribes as Scythians, explained that these tribes had caused the destruction of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom in the second half of the 2nd century BCE. Most of the Scythians beginning from the Caspian Sea are called Dai, and those situated more towards the east Masashte and Saka. The rest have the common appellation of Scythians, but each separate tribe has its peculiar name. All, or the greatest part of them, are nomads. The best-known tribes are those who deprived the Greeks of Bactriana, the Asii, Pasiani, Tochari, and Sakarali, who came from the country on the other side of the Jaxartes, opposite the Saka and Sogdiani. The last Greco-Bactrian king, Helioclezon, retreated and moved his capital to the Kabul Valley. The eastern part of Bactria was occupied by Pashtun people. The Yuezhī appear to have quickly obtained the submission of the Greco-Bactrians. At the time, the Yuezhī were organized into 5 major tribes, each led by a Yabgu, or tribal chief. These tribes were known to the Chinese as Xiumi in western Wakhan and Xibik, Gushwang in Badakhshan and adjoining territories north of the Oxus, Shuangmi in the region of Shufnan, Zidan in the region of Baukht, and Dumi in the region of Terms. A description of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom was made by Zhang Qian after the area's conquest by the Yuezhī. Daxia is located over 2,000 li southwest of Dayuan, south of the Gui River. Its people cultivate the land and have cities and houses. The customs are like those of Taiyuan. It has no great ruler but only a number of petty chiefs ruling the various cities. The people are poor in the use of arms and afraid of battle, but they are clever at commerce. After the Great Yuezhi moved west and attacked the lands, the entire country came under the sway. The population of the country is large, numbering some 1 million or more persons. The capital is called the city of Lanchi and has a market where all sorts of goods are bought and sold. Quote, after they settled in Bactria, the Yuezhī became Hellenized to some degree, as shown by their adoption of the Greek alphabet and by some remaining coins, minted in the style of the Greco-Bactrian kings, with the text in Greek. The area of Bactria they settled came to be known as Tokaristan, and the Yuezhī were known as Tokaroi by the Greeks. Commercial relations with China also flourished, as many Chinese missions were sent throughout the 1st century BCE. The largest of these embassies to foreign states numbered several hundred persons, while even the smaller parties included over 100 members. In the course of 1 year, anywhere from 5 to 6 to over 10 parties would be sent out. The Hu Hansu also records the visit of Yuezhī envoys to the Chinese capital in 02 BCE, who gave oral teachings on Buddhist sutras to a student, suggesting that some Yuezhī already followed the Buddhist faith during the 1st century BCE. A later Chinese annotation in Zhang Shouji's Shiji, quoting Wanzhen's Strange Things from the Southern Region, a now lost 3rd century text from the Wu Kingdom, describes the Kushans as living in the same general area north of India, in cities of Greco-Roman style, and with sophisticated handicraft. The quotes are dubious, as Wanzhen probably never visited the Yuezhī kingdom through the Silk Road, though he might have gathered his information from the trading ports in the coastal south. The Chinese never adopted the term Gushwang and continued to call them Yuezhī. The Great Yuezhi are located about 7,000 li north of India. Their land is at a high altitude, the climate is dry, the region is remote. The king of the state calls himself Son of Heaven. There are so many riding horses in the country that the number often reaches several 100,000. City layouts and palaces are quite similar to those of Dakin. The skin of the people there is reddish-white. People are skillful at horse archery. Local products, rarities, treasures, clothing, and upholstery are very good, and even India cannot compare with it. Hindu Kush. The area of the Hindu Kush was ruled by the Western Indo-Greek king until the reign of Hermias. After that date, no Indo-Greek kings are known in the area. According to Bopiracci, no trace of Indo-Scythian occupation have been found in the Paropamisade Western Gandhara. The Hindu Kush may have been subsumed by the Yuezhī, who by then had dominated Greco-Bactria for almost 2 centuries, as they had done in Bactria with the copying of Greco-Bactrian coinage. The Yuezhī copied the coinage of Hermos on a vast scale, up to around 40 CE, when the design blends into the coinage of the Kushan king Kujalakadphises. Such coins provide the earliest names of presumed Yuezhī princes, Sapadbises and exiles, both around 20 BCE. Kushan Empire. By the end of the 1st century BCE, one of the 5 tribes of the Yuezhī, the Gushwang, managed to take control of the Yuezhī Confederation. For that point, the Yuezhī extended the control over the northwestern area of the Indian subcontinent, founding the Kushan Empire, which was to rule the region for several centuries. The Yuezhī came to be known as Kushan among Western civilizations. However, the Chinese kept calling them Yuezhī throughout the historical records over a period of several centuries. The Yuezhī Kushans expanded to the east during the 1st century CE to found the Kushan Empire. The first Kushan emperor, Kujalakadphises, ostensibly associated himself with King Hermias on his coins, suggesting that he may have been one of the king's descendants by alliance, or at least wanted to claim his legacy. The unification of the Yuezhī tribes and the rise of the Kushan are documented in the Chinese historical chronicle, the Huanshu. More than 100 years later, the Zihou of Gushwang, named Qiuzhi, attacked and exterminated the 4 other Zihou. He set himself up as king of a kingdom called Gushwang. He invaded Anxi and took the Jiaofu region. He also defeated the whole of the kingdoms of Puda and Jiban. Qiuzhi was more than 80 years old when he died. His son Zhang Gaozhen became king in his place. He returned and defeated Tianzhu and installed a general to supervise and lead it. The Yuezhī then became extremely rich. All the kingdoms called the Gushwang king, but the Han call them by their original name, Da Yuezhi. The Yuezhī Kushan integrated Buddhism into a pantheon of many deities and became great promoters of Mahayana Buddhism, and their interactions with Greek civilization helped the Gandharan culture and Greco-Buddhism flourish. During the 1st and 2nd centuries, the Kushan Empire expanded militarily to the north and occupied parts of the Tarim Basin, their original grounds, parting them at the center of the lucrative Central Asian commerce with the Roman Empire. When the Han dynasty desired to advance north, Emperor Wu sent the explorers Zhang Qian to see the kingdoms to the west and to ally with the Yuezhī people in order to fight the Xiongnu tribe. The Yuezhī continued to collaborate militarily with the Chinese against nomadic incursion, particularly with the Chinese general Ban Chao against the Sogdians in 84 CE when the latter were trying to support a revolt by the king of Kashgar. Around 85 CE, they also assisted the Chinese general in an attack on Turpan, east of the Tarim Basin. In recognition of the support to the Chinese, the Kushans requested, but were denied, a Han princess, even after they had sent presents to the Chinese court. In retaliation, they marched on Ban Chao in 86 CE with a force of 70,000 but, exhausted by the expedition, were finally defeated by the smaller Chinese Chinese force. The Kushans retreated and paid tribute to the Chinese Empire during the reign of the Chinese Emperor Han He. About 120 CE, Kushan troops installed Chenpan, a prince who had been sent as a hostage to them and had become a favorite of the Kushan emperor, on the throne of Kashgar, thus expanding the power and influence in the Tarim Basin, and introduced the Brahmi script, the Indian Prakrit language for administration, and Greco-Buddhist art, which developed into Serindian art. Benefiting from this territorial expansion, the Yuezhī Kushans were among the first to introduce Buddhism to northern and northeastern Asia, by direct missionary efforts and the translation of Buddhist scriptures into Chinese. Major Yuezhī missionaries and translators included Lokaksuma and Dharmaraksa, who went to China and established translation bureaus, thereby being at the center of the Silk Road transmission of Buddhism. The Chinese kept referring to the Kushans as Da Yuezhi throughout the centuries. In the Sangwozhi, it is recorded that in 229 CE, the king of the Da Yuezhi, Bodiao, sent his envoy to present tribute, and His Majesty granted him the title of King of the Da Yuezhi, intimate with the Wei. The Sassanids extended the dominion into Bactria during the reign of Vardashir I around 230 CE.